US President Joe Biden will fly to New Orleans on Monday to be with the victims of the January 1 terror attack. US First Lady Jill Biden will accompany the US President as he meets with emergency responders, investigators, victims and survivors of the terror attack. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has intensified their investigations, their probe into the terror attack that killed 14 and injured over 30 New Year revelers in New Orleans. And it now appears that the main suspect, the terrorist, was Texas-born US Army veteran Shamshaddin Jabbar. He apparently had prepared and planted at least 2 improvised explosive devices before ramming his vehicle through the crowd on the 1st of January 2025 morning. A video of Jabbar swearing allegiance to the terrorist organization Islamic State is currently under investigation. FBI teams have searched through his house. They've reached the mosque that he frequented in North Houston and are questioning several of those who are considered close to Jabbar. The Federal Bureau of Investigation now have multiple teams that have fanned out across New Orleans and of course in Houston, Texas, probing the background of the US Army veteran and terror attack accused Shamshaddin Jabbar. Initial investigations have revealed that he prepared and planted at least 2 improvised explosive devices in New Orleans before he rammed his Ford 150 electric truck through a crowd of New Year revelers. His brother, Abdul Rahman Jabbar, has been quoted by American media saying Islamic faith taught him partying in places like New Orleans wasn't righteous. Some videos of Jabbar have also surfaced, including one where he swears allegiance to the Islamic State. But how, when and where was a former US Army soldier radicalized to the extent that he could target people in the United States of America? That's now a matter of intense investigation. We get you more in this report.
As New Orleans mourns its dead, the investigation deepens. The FBI has now revealed chilling details about the attacker, Shamshaddin Jabbar, a 42-year-old Army veteran from Texas. Revelation: attacker Jabbar was an ISIS supporter. The probe has thrown light on Jabbar's radicalization, his connection to ISIS and the deadly series of events. Revelation: attacker placed 2 IEDs at 2 locations. Revelation: Jabbar had remote IED detonator. The FBI revealed that hours before the attack, Jabbar planted remotely operated explosives at nearby locations. While these bombs were never detonated, their presence amplified the panic. Revelation: Jabbar posted videos supporting ISIS.
They've established that the attacker was the same person who planted the explosives in those ice coolers in 2 nearby locations in the French Quarter just a few hours before he rammed into the crowd with his vehicle.
Jabbar's social media activity showed clear ISIS sympathies, with videos pledging allegiance to the terror group and expressing intent to kill. Investigators believe Jabbar had joined ISIS last summer. He also believed in a war between believers and non-believers. Jabbar kept a bomb-making workbench in his ramshackle Texas trailer home, where a Quran was left open to chilling passage.
If we walk through the home, we see some signs of what he was up to. He had this work area here, lots of different chemicals splayed around, his collection of religious materials, his Qurans, an open Quran with a passage there, as well as even the Bible here, but mostly books on Islam.
Shamshaddin Jabbar, a former US Army veteran who served in Afghanistan, unleashed terror on January 1st in New Orleans. Jabbar opened fire on fleeing revelers. The horrifying incident ended after a shootout with police in which Jabbar was killed. Yet the damage was done. 15 lives lost, 30 injured, and countless questions left unanswered. President-elect Donald Trump slammed President Joe Biden's immigration policies, blaming them for enabling radical Islamic terrorism. Meanwhile, US President Joe Biden confirmed that the FBI said there appeared to be no link between the attack in New Orleans and the incident in Las Vegas.
We're also continuing to investigate whether or not there's any connection between the New Orleans attack and the explosion in Las Vegas. As of now, they've just been briefed. They have not found any evidence of such a connection thus far.
Is the United States facing a surge in extremist threats? Bureau Report, India Today.
So a team of the Federal Bureau of Investigation raided Shamshaddin Jabbar's residence and found multiple workstations amidst reports that he was working on experiments with making improvised explosive devices and rigging up crude bombs. The investigators are also looking through his personal belongings, his clothes, documents, travel details, and also a prayer book. A certain verse is being discussed extensively in the United States of America. Meanwhile, the US National Security Advisor and President-elect Donald Trump's team, Mike Waltz, he's been quoted in the US media as saying, and these are strong words that come from Mike Waltz, he's the next National Security Advisor of the United States of America. He says it's time to close the borders. He's said that there are at least 300 suspects on the terror watch list who already slipped into the United States of America. Remember, even President Trump attacked the open borders policy. Now, Mike Waltz is saying that there are at least eight Islamic State operatives who are arrested for reconnaissance in 3 different US cities, but there are several suspects who are still at large right now. So he's advocating a very strong policy, a strong offensive and defensive strategy that the Trump administration are likely to undertake. And as far as their defensive policy or the internal policy within the United States is concerned, strong law enforcement domestically and overseas, setting up, if required, additional bases for intelligence operations, for intelligence gathering, and also intelligence-based special forces operations. That's the requirement according to the new NSA of the United States of America. Of course, his policies, or President Trump's policies, take effect after the 20th of January 2025. But there are multiple questions that are being asked about Shamshaddin Jabbar. Why was he not on the radar of intelligence agencies in the United States of America, especially after he put out a video in public domain swearing allegiance to the Islamic State terrorist organization? Shifting focus to the other big story we're tracking here on India First in the United States of America. A ransacked home, bloodstains in the bathroom, half-eaten food. These are some of the unsettling images from the apartment of OpenAI whistleblower Suchir Balaji in San Francisco. Now, investigative journalist George Webb claims that the Indian origin techie Suchir Balaji was murdered in the Silicon Valley. Webb says there is evidence that points to an interrogation-style killing, not suicide, as claimed by investigators. Listen in to this exclusive conversation with India Today's news director, Rahul Kanwal.
Ever since India Today carried the interview of Purnima Rao, the grieving mother of Suchir Balaji, the techie who was found dead in Silicon Valley in mysterious circumstances, just a few days after he raised his voice against the malpractices being followed by artificial intelligence companies, several questions have been swirling in the air around the circumstances that led to Suchir's death. This is a story that's resonated very deeply with our audience, and we're joined now from near San Francisco in Silicon Valley by George Webb. He's an investigative journalist who's been looking at this case on the ground very closely. Mr. Webb, you've had an opportunity to go to the apartment where Suchir Balaji stayed. You've spoken to the parents. You've also looked at what the private investigator hired by the family has said. Give our viewers your understanding at this moment of how and why Indian origin techie Suchir Balaji died.
Well, I published some of the videos that I took, and you can see this is the doorway that we think the person came through. don't have cameras there. You can see this is coming into the apartment of Suchir Balaji. You can see the blood comes out of the bathroom area all the way into the apartment. He's normally a very fastidious person. It's ransacked. The apartment's ransacked, obviously. He also did not leave a suicide note. He was very close to his mother and father, so that doesn't make any sense. He was eating, as you can see there, up until the last minutes. He had a very nice phone call with his parents this evening of November the 22nd. You could see you could access in the garage there, so there's a camera there. But going down this hallway, people were coming and going. Every time I've gone to the location 5 or 6 times, people coming and going. But as you get into the bathroom, you'll see clearly that he had been hit from behind or pushed from behind, and his nose had hit the sink. You could see the blood on the sink, and then when he stands up, you can see the blood droplets coming down like rain droplets from his nose, and then he's turned around. He's turned around and made to sit, I believe. That's what the investigator said. And as he's being interrogated with a gun to his forehead between his eyes, which is an interrogation position. It's not a suicide position. Nobody shoots themselves like that. And then he's shot between the eyes a little bit to the right eyebrow, and the bullet misses the brain. Nobody misses their own brain when they're trying to commit suicide. And then the bullet lodges in the C1 to C2 vertebra. So he then starts crawling, and you can see clearly there's only one place the blood can come out, and that's the hole in the entry wound in his forehead. There's only one place it can come out, and that's in front of him. And you can see clearly 3 distinct pools of blood going out and into the hallway, as you see in your photos here. And he crawls through all those pools of blood trying to get out of the bathroom. Now, no one who's committing suicide is trying to make a death crawl to get to safety or get help. That just nothing here makes any sense in terms of a suicide.
Why do you think the California police was so quick to call this a case of suicide instead of probing the murder angle? And how have they reacted ever since the parents published and spoke about the details of a private investigator's report? What's really going on the ground in California, according to you?
Well, I think the two things that made them kind of rush to judgment, the San Francisco Police Department, was the door, as you saw. You need a key lock, key card tap to get in, but people can come and go, people with dogs, people going in back and forth. So we saw people coming and going all the time without tapping in. But the fact that he did not have a forced entry into his tap entry system in his apartment, they said, well, no forced entry, therefore it has to be a suicide. They supposedly only deliberated 14 minutes, which is an incredibly short period of time, so they didn't confirm that his hand actually had the resin on it for shooting the weapon. They didn't confirm the bullet matched to the gun, the ballistics. They didn't do the ballistics checking that you would normally do in a murder case. They didn't take into account the no suicide note. They didn't take into account that the apartment had been ransacked. Most importantly, they didn't take into account that a drive that Suchir was making while he was on a vacation, this was his birthday, was the day before. He was making a backup device, and the backup device is now missing from the house. This was the backup device that he was preparing for the New York Times. He had a meeting coming up with the New York Times for discovery in the lawsuit of the New York Times versus OpenAI. OpenAI is ChatGPT. So there's a lot of things here where he was named as a witness only a week before as the star witness in the New York Times case, as well as 3 other lawsuits. So there's a lot of things and clouds hanging over this in a very important lawsuit that you would, and a very young man who was very happy on this camping trip, you would look into that. As an investigator, you would say this doesn't make sense.
But if at all, and the insinuation that I heard from mother, and you seem to be suggesting that as well, is that someone associated with the AI tech industry was in some way involved with this murder. They wanted to suppress what Suchir Balaji was allegedly trying to reveal. If that's the case, it is the most sensational murder case in a very long time. But why do we take away the idea that this could be somebody with some kind of a personal animosity or just a random case of somebody barging into his house, needn't necessarily be linked with the AI industry, which is the much more sinister conspiracy? Could have just been, a case of murder not linked to this controversy and his revelations to the New York Times.
Yes, well, I'm not saying OpenAI did it. I really don't think OpenAI, with as much trouble as they're in with all these lawsuits, would help their case by making a martyr out of Suchir Balaji. But the technology that he had, this is a genius young man. Man is in the center of the high-tech capital, in the most important industry, in the hottest technology in the world that might change all industries, medicine, all the way through defense applications. And he's the guy who trained the system with his team, John Schulman and Ilya Sutskever. They're the people who work directly for the person who just got the Nobel Prize in AI. So he is the most important, the smartest kid that you could possibly hire. He had his whole life ahead of him. He was about ready to start a startup. He was working with Silicon Valley. I was there yesterday. So he had so much going for him. The fact that he would commit suicide doesn't make any sense. But it could be somebody breaking in and just a robbery, but they didn't take anything, right? They didn't take the laptop. The parents have the laptop under lock and key. And they didn't take his phone. He was listening to his phone. He had earbuds in while he was listening to music. One of the earbuds came out of his ear. It looked like when he was his nose hit the sink. And then the second earbud didn't come out all the way out until he crawled out into the main part of his apartment. So it just looks like it was ransacked for the drive. And it doesn't look like the person, if it was a robbery, took anything. They would take the laptop, you would think, and the phone. I don't know. So that's all speculation at this point. But the San Francisco police need to reopen the case.
What have they said ever since these revelations and the charges by the mother, and you've been doing your own reporting around the case? What's been the response from the San Francisco police?
They haven't released the police report. We've asked for the police report. They haven't released the preliminary autopsy. I've went to the office of the coroner and medical examiner many times and asked for it personally, as well as the parents have asked for it, have not received it. Part of this is because there's a new mayor coming into San Francisco in 3 days, and he's coming in on an anti-crime policies and platform. And the person who is his transition manager for the transition period right now is Sam Altman of OpenAI. So this is coming at the worst time, as Sam Altman is going to be the new advisor to the new mayor, and the new mayor is going to be inaugurated in 3 days here in San Francisco, and now there's murders, this cloud is hanging over.
I also saw that the parents were saying that some interview that Suchir Balaji did with some international media organizations wasn't played out. So how are you seeing that? If a lot of what you're suggesting, the mother is suggesting, is correct, then why is the local media so silent in this story?
That's another interesting thing. I really hope it's not because he's an Indian American. That really would upset me. Silicon Valley wants the best and the brightest no matter where they come from. I've met both the parents. They're also incredibly intelligent. The father's involved in AI. OpenAI knew, and Scale AI before that he was one of the smartest kids in Silicon Valley. He won huge competitions, national competitions in his high school. It's not far from where Steve Jobs went to high school. So I can't understand why Silicon Valley isn't covering this story. I just cannot understand it.
Yeah, I saw that Purnima Rao, the mother of Suchir Balaji, accused you of violating some kind of a non-disclosure agreement. The family itself doesn't seem very happy with the fact that you're on TV, you're revealing all these videos that you have access to, which they say you shouldn't have.
Well, I didn't sign this non-disclosure. They sent it to me right before I went there, and not far around the corner, I said to them, no one understands this is a murder. What they think is everyone thinks it's, you know, a grieving mother who's upset, right? But she's not an investigator. She's not an expert. The San Francisco police look at all these things all the time, and they have ruled it a suicide. And it's your word as a non-expert amateur versus professionals and experts. No one's going to believe, and now she's gotten over it now, and now she agrees it was a good idea. She's retweeted some of my postings because now everybody realizes it's a murder. Until people see the video evidence, they don't think it's a murder. But once they see the evidence, especially the evidence, you know, the ones I sent you that are inside the bathroom, once you see that, there's no question about it. There's no question.
Okay. So you've had your say. You've given us your perspective on what you think happened, and most importantly, what the local authorities need to do. That's most important. Ultimately, it's down to the police to try and investigate this case professionally. That's what all of us expect. George Webb, for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.